Welcome, welcome. How are you melting today? I'm breaking pattern. It's Friday, the day I would normally go to Monchique, but it's just, I don't need to go and it's just rather warm. So I thought I'd make this video and just share a few more thoughts that expand on the previous video. This cycle of gold, silver, bronze and iron, I spoke about we've moved into an iron age. Now obviously in accepted history that's something very different, but I use evidence that I can point to explain what I mean. Basically the Iron Age to me would be the Industrial Revolution, where things are being cast in iron, which is leading to factories, leading to mechanization. From that Iron Age obviously then would come a Golden Age. Not for everybody obviously, but you've got the emergence of such a thing as the middle class that has a slightly less physically challenging occupation as when everything was manual and done by hand. Farming is a perfect example of this, when you consider how many people were employed in farming in the 19th century compared to today. So that's gone through a sort of Iron Age in some senses, depending on your perspective. And we can look at architecture as well. With all the wonders of modern technology, you've only got to consider the enormous sizes and the fantastical quoted weights of stone blocks. The technology is such today that there isn't the capability to move blocks of these enormous quoted weights. Things like the Great Pyramid of Giza, Baalbek. And in some senses, if we come from a perspective of measuring things in the vast size of it, is the Golden Age. You can see in architecture how things have transitioned and got smaller and smaller and smaller. And it follows this cycle. You'll often hear expressions about talking about the Greeks and having a golden age and other civilizations. There's also, by that implication, what you could call a silver age, where things are not quite as good as they were for various reasons, but still pretty good. And then there's this gradual sort of decline into what you could say is a Bronze Age. You'll see this theme very much in Paris, expressed in the Olympic Games, the gold, silver and bronze, but there's also the iron. And the iron is the most rigid, it represents the most solid, but is it really? If we look at the architecture of today, from an engineering standpoint, it might look wonderful, but when you consider that a lot of things are made with steel girders, which forms like the rebar, the internal spine of a structure, and then it's clad and encased in concrete. And if you consider how inferior concrete is to lime-based mortar, it's very much an Iron Age, so things won't last. I refer you to Whitewick channel and look at what happens to rebar. Obviously there's a factor of the environment and the weather conditions. So if something was submerged for many years, if it was encased in concrete, that concrete is porous, whereas the lime breathes, so it would dry out again. But you've only got to look what happens to the rebar. There's nothing left of it. You're left with an impression of it. And it is just the hardened concrete that is left, or the hardened structure. And you can see how you've got this decline. So things follow these loops. And you also have to consider how can we explain this? You are a host and you have invited, and maybe some spontaneous, unexpected guests turn up. And you can facilitate these guests' homes and state benefits, various employments, in preference to the residents that didn't actually have a say in any of this anyway. So from the perspective of the guest, be they invited or just the gate crashers, we call them, they're getting a. You've got same with the Olympic Games, gold, silver, bronze. You've got 3 tiers, and so if we include iron as the lowest of the 4, you've got a 4-tier system. And so the amazing thing is this time loops. So something can go over a long period of time. So if we consider something like Bolbec and Angkor Wat, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the South American pyramids, and many of these ancient structures, their colossal size, how that's a golden age and how long it takes to move to an iron age. But it's very much like wheels, so I can compare, say, the rotations of Mercury as compared to the rotations of Pluto. The vast time difference, so it's concentric circles. So the guests that are now getting a different tier, a different level of reception than the residents, that creates 2 tiers for a start, which also comes with a lot of resentment. It's social engineering. But as things stand, and as what has been brewing is, to the perspective of the guest, is like a golden age, but it can very rapidly turn to an iron age, which will unfold, and unfortunately some that have drunk from that cup of that golden age will be innocently find themselves in an iron age. This is all engineered. It's following this same pattern. and you'll get this. In a way, you could say that the technological revolution is going through its golden age when things are rapidly making advances. It becomes apparent that that's a loop anyway, that there's nothing new under the sun. It's all been done before, maybe in a slightly different way. But there's still this perception of inventiveness and not reaching a conclusion. So it's very much in the golden age. But of course, they will follow a silver and a bronze age and an iron age to that. In some ways, you could say the value of old computers, it's to do with their circuit boards, and gold was used. So that is also showing that it's the start of a golden age of the technological revolution this time around. But it's like a wheel, so something closer to the axle, to the center point, will get a very quick loop going from gold, silver, bronze and into iron. But of course, where this is leading, Levet has described it as we're moving into not a golden age, but a platinum age. Some describe it as going into a Jupiterian age of expansion. Some will call it moving to a Venus age. I've suggested that it's the age of Junus, which is the product of Jupiter and Venus. the bringing together of a divine feminine and a divine masculine principle, which is shown symbolically in brass, as in the brass serpent that must be raised up. Oh, there's a welcome breeze, but it's irritating with the hair. I've had to contend, it seems to have stopped now, since I started making the video, which I would suggest is also taking active steps. There was a Caterpillar tractor bulldozer that's redefining these sort of roadways for the harvesting of the eucalyptus trees and also creating fire breaks. But that seems to have moved on now, which is grateful for that, because it's rather off-putting on what I'm trying to say. I had a very interesting video land in my lap. I think the channel is called Paul Whitewick. I'll put the link in the description. And the title of the video is Who Owns England? And what transpires from that, you have to pay £3 a time to look at every entry in the land registry. So if you've got 72 million, you can find out who owns all of England and Wales. It doesn't include Scotland in this. They've got a slightly different system. But it's very revealing that how difficult it is to actually ascertain the information, tracing it back to the source, to the center point of the axle, shall we say. It's the research methods and things I feel are very valuable for anything you may be looking into. Well, if you can't do it this way, then look, there is another alternative way to come into this. It comes back to that saying that Jason often says, if something is true, it can be seen from multiple, not just mathematical, but it can be seen from multiple vantage points. And there are ways of doing a bit of digging and finding out at least some of the information, or it gives you a clue as to where it's going. But I raise the point, when we're talking about who owns the land, many people will say, I own my own house, I own my own property. But imagine if you were to find a precious mineral, something that would be in demand like oil. How quick you'll find that your ownership of that land the rug can be pulled out from under you. It's not built on a solid foundation unless you've got the subsoil rights. There will be such a thing as well, it's a bird. It's a legal eagle. It will behave just like an eagle. It will see the prize. It will swoop and get its claws in with a compulsory purchase order, and you'd very soon find rapidly how much your ownership of the land will be brushed aside with the wing of this particular eagle. Something to bear in mind as well. But going back to the real topic of this video, it's the loops, and it's not just like one wheel. There's wheels within the wheels. It's what's often referred to as Ezekiel's wheels. And you can see whether you want to go with the idea of a solar system or a geocentric system, you've still got these planetary bodies. They're doing circles within a circle. It's wheels within wheels is being reflected in that. And you'll find, if you study the business world, when things are coming to a climax that could explode out like a volcano into extreme violence. There's been two world versions in the 20th century of such a thing, and you'll see they follow the pattern of seasons in fours. Another example of this would be the day. you could divide it into morning, afternoon, evening, and night, and there only has to be a certain commonality of agreement. Because would you say 9 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock in the evening? Where do you draw the cut-off point as what you class as night? Is that purely the time when you sleep? And are you including daylight? So as soon as it's light, you're then classing that as morning. So that would have a variable depending on which season you're in and how much daylight you have. So you'll see there's a loop, there's wheels within wheels, and they're in fours. But through the four, what can then also come, it leads to a number 5, or perhaps the start of another cycle of 4. Even as a platinum age, perhaps the platinum replaces the iron. That to me would make sense, especially if we talk in terms of 5D and moving to a more crystalline state, for example. How this plays out in the physical world, to me, is exciting to sort of see unfolding. So I don't have any fear of it. It's more because I can look back, and I can look at the present, and I can see the same patterns of wheels within wheels of going through this, starting with the golden age, which then transitions to a silver, and then a bronze, and then an iron. Another thing you may want to ponder in this equation. So if you've got a wheel and it's had so much resistance by inertia or apathy, say over generations and generations. So if you are not one of the invited guests, but you are a resident in this cosmic hotel, this reality, we'll call it that just for argument's sake for this video. What would it take? How much fuel would it require to get the ball rolling, get things moving again, when you're in like an iron age where you've had like an iron grip? There's certainly been an iron curtain, and peeking behind that curtain from its formation, or way before its formation actually, say from 1917, what probably was a Bronze Age suddenly found itself very much in an Iron Age with a hammer as part of its symbology, and obviously a sickle as well, because things go in cycles. You've only got to look at nature for that as well. Think of wheat or corn, and think of nature in general. The cycles it goes through is always in fours. But it's arguably, when you've gone through number 4, there is a number 5 before there is a number 1 again, which we could take number 1 as being birth. So it's a new start. And then we could subdivide a lifespan between birth and death into 4 parts, not unlike what is expressed in nature, for example. So there's a few things in here that I feel are worth just pointing out, observing the cycles, the wheels, but also consider that it may not actually be just coming full circle. It may then have a trajectory that then goes off, that may form an 8, for example, which you could say will bring you back to the whole point between 2 cycles. We're in a realm of perceived duality after all, in all its many permutations, day and night, and light and dark, and so on. There's a few things there just to ponder, and also the research methodology. it's something that may not be readily apparent, but I hope what does become apparent, if you look at these cycles and look at the perception of what is pulling the strings or powering things, powering these wheels into motion, that it's a hidden hand that doesn't want to get its own hand dirty for a start. And it may sort of lead on to, it depends on the trajectory that comes off of that circle, the sort of leaping point, which becomes a new start point, a stepping into the unknown, a sort of moving out of that circle, you could say. There's more, but it's dissolved at the moment. There'll probably have to be another video on this at some point. But I wanted to share a few things, and yeah, look at the research method. What becomes clear with this control system is it lacks creativity, it lacks imagination. It requires thinking out the box, coming out of that circle, and having an all-round perspective and seeing the circles within circles within circles, and seeing that some of them are actually closer to the axle and then will come round a lot quicker. What goes around comes around is another saying. That can have many implications depending on the perspective of how you hear that and what it is referring to. But I feel you're going to see quite a few of these circles will have made a completion over the next few years, and there will be other circles that will suddenly emerge, seem to spring up like an air bubble pops out of a sort of molten out of the Iron Age. There will be things that spring up. Now, whether they are good things or bad things, that will require you to use your own discernment. But you can certainly discover a lot by looking at and studying the patterns and things, and also by breaking patterns. It's taking active steps, so to break a cycle requires breaking pattern, to step out of that accepted circle. And many of you that would class yourselves as truth seekers, or you don't even need to give yourself a label if you're seeing the world that it doesn't seem to make sense, it doesn't seem to add up. So you're stepping into a new into an unknown realm, and it can feel like you're stepping out of a circle, and you'll find that no doubt your circle of acquaintances, be it family, friends or whatever, will change, and that will continue to change, which is part of your spiritual growth. The frequencies are like bands, so as you progress through your spiritual growth, unless others are matching your frequency or moving on at the same rate, then you'll find that you'll start moving into different circles anyway. It's nothing to have regret about. It's more a recognition of you're therefore progressing, and it's leading you into new things. But obviously you do need to use your discernment, because some of these things may actually be lures that are trying to entice you. The adversary will advertise itself to say, come and look at this, come and look at this. Things then can grab our attention. It's essential to remain in balance in self and always come back to center, so you can break that sort of time loop in yourself by bringing yourself back to breath, rather than going off on a massive trajectory that may turn out to be sort of relatively speaking like how long does it take for Pluto to make one circle, shall we say, as opposed to Mercury. But the pattern is always the same in everything in this reality, and I would point to what is playing out externally, be it actually with any factual basis or not, doesn't actually matter. It's following a pattern, and it's pattern recognition that is key. You'll either see it or you won't see it. You'll feel it or you won't feel it. No, all we can do is just sort of point it out from a perception, and it's up to you to weigh it up inside yourself as to whether you feel that is true or not true, or there is something in it. Entirely up to you. That's your free will. That's a cosmic law. That's one circle or cycle that would probably not be a good thing to try and break, and it would seem to go against a lot. And certainly the perception of, shall we say, a control system seems to operate on not interfering with free will, but more by deception. So even that is not breaking that law. So there are, not in the written sense, but there are laws that exist that even what you would perceive as something extremely negative and not in your best interests also conforms to this same pattern. Right, a vehicle is coming, so may have clouds of dust in a moment, so I'm going to say unconditional love to you all.